amid the unstoppable rise of Nazism across Europe. When France fell and the continent seemed lost, only one nation stood strong: the United Kingdom. A besieged island became the last bastion of freedom against Hitler's power. Its geography protected it, its navy controlled the seas, and its air force proved in the Battle of Britain that the terror of the Blitz was not enough to break its spirit. With Winston Churchill as the voice of resistance and a people willing to endure Nazi attacks without ever surrendering. The United Kingdom kept the flame of the Allied struggle alive. This raises the question, could Britain have defeated Nazi Germany on its own? To answer this great question, we must examine several aspects, and the first one we'll focus on is the British Army. Although small at the start of the war compared to the Wehrmacht, it had an incomparable advantage: the Empire. Britain was not fighting alone. Behind every British soldier stood millions of men from territories stretching from the Caribbean to the Pacific. India, a key piece of the imperial machine, contributed more than 2.5 million volunteers, becoming the largest army of its kind in the world. Meanwhile, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and several African colonies also sent hundreds of thousands of men, forming a human mosaic that reflected the diversity of the British Empire. This vast diversity brought with it a unique flexibility. The British and their colonial allies fought in radically different settings. From the scorching deserts of North Africa to the impenetrable jungles of Burma. In this context, their experience and discipline made up for the lack of modernity in their initial equipment. Thus, despite the fact that the early British tanks were inferior to the German ones, the training of their troops and their cohesion allowed them to resist and even counterattack in crucial campaigns. To understand the importance of this vast and diverse army, we can highlight that the United Kingdom and its domains contributed nearly 30% of the Allied soldiers. A figure that demonstrates the imperial weight in the conflict. Now, beyond the cold statistics, these forces demonstrated extraordinary resilience, fighting in conditions where geographical and logistical difficulties seemed insurmountable. The strength of the British Army did not lie solely in the number of men, but in the collective resilience of an empire that, despite being scattered across the world, remained united under the flag of St. George's Cross. However, that same diversity that gave strength to the United Kingdom also limited it. Its vastness forced it to spread forces across too many fronts. North Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, the Atlantic, and the defense of the Indian subcontinent were all fronts where London had to fight.
These Indian troops who are fighting in the Middle East, and those other Indian troops which are standing on guard in the Far East, are protecting India. They are keeping the war at a distance from India's shore.
Thus, every division sent to Egypt or Burma was one less available for the heart of Europe. And that was the real problem. Britain could resist, but it seemed impossible for it to attack on so many fronts simultaneously. To defeat Nazi Germany, it was essential to open a land front in Europe, and that was beyond Britain's reach alone. The expeditionary army that had defended France in 1940 was barely evacuated at Dunkirk, losing much of its heavy equipment. Rebuilding that force took years, and even then, the islands could not muster the enormous logistical apparatus necessary for an invasion like Normandy. Meanwhile, the RAF controlled the skies and the Royal Navy ruled the seas. The other side of Britain was its land army, which lacked the critical mass to face the Wehrmacht on equal terms on continental Europe. Total war required a concentration of forces that could not be sustained with Britain's isolated resources. The empire was both a blessing and a curse. It provided soldiers but scattered efforts by forcing the defense of distant territories against Japanese expansionism and the Axis threat in the Mediterranean. That is, the United Kingdom had the ability to resist indefinitely, but not to strike a decisive blow. Without the United States and the Soviet Union, British resistance would have been condemned to a stalemate with no end in sight, unable to launch the attack that would topple the Third Reich. But this was not the only aspect to consider. A shrewd leader could exploit the potential of the British Army to the maximum to overcome its limitations. And during World War II, the United Kingdom had one.
Churchill provides security of purpose to those around him, and he's driving power in government and how decisions are made, and the famous notes he puts on the documents, action this day, and so on. That energy and dynamism is what drives British policy and strategic thinking through that particular period.
If anyone could guide Britain to glory during the conflict, it was Winston Churchill. One of the first things the British leader addressed was weaponry. The reality was that when the war broke out, the United Kingdom was at a technological disadvantage compared to Nazi Germany. The Matilda II and Crusader tanks were slow, poorly armored, and outgunned by the German panzers, which were dominating European battlefields in 1940. But the story of British weaponry was, for the most part, a race of adaptation and overcoming obstacles. The British industry, despite being constantly under the threat of aerial bombardment, managed to recover and reinvent itself, producing more competitive models such as the Churchill and, in collaboration with the United States, the famous Sherman Firefly, capable of facing the dreaded German Tigers. In the air, however, the British found their winning card right from the start. The Hawker Hurricane, and especially the Supermarine Spitfire, became symbols of resistance during the Battle of Britain. These aircraft not only rivaled German fighters, but thanks to radar technology, they could intercept them with unprecedented efficiency. Later, bombers like the Avro Lancaster and the de Havilland Mosquito brought the war to the heart of the Reich, destroying factories, refineries, and cities. British ingenuity was also reflected in its ability to respond quickly to enemy innovations. As the Germans deployed new weapons, British engineers found solutions that kept their army in the fight. While they never matched the industrial volume of Germany, and even less so the United States, they managed to develop a balanced and effective arsenal that allowed them to resist and counterattack. British weaponry was not the most numerous or advanced, but it served a vital function. It sustained the defense of the island and provided the tools necessary to stay in the fight until the Allies could gather the massive force that would eventually defeat the Third Reich. But what else was needed for these images to reflect an exclusively British victory?
The official hour of the British occupation took place in front of the German Victory Monument overlooking the Tiergarten in the Charlottenburger Strasse. The Union Jack, carried throughout the 3,000-mile advance from El Alamein, flies in front of the memorial.
To begin with, the British had to eliminate any threat before starting their path to glory. And while they were able to resist in the air and on land, at sea, the most dangerous battle for their survival was being fought: the Battle of the Atlantic. As an island, the United Kingdom was completely dependent on its maritime routes. From them came wheat from Canada, oil from the United States, raw materials from Africa and Asia, and even military aid that began flowing under the American Lend-Lease program. Without these convoys, the nation would be condemned to collapse. That's where the German submarines, the feared U-boats, came in, unleashing an unrelenting war. In groups known as wolf packs, they harassed entire convoys, sinking tankers, merchant ships, and transport vessels. There were times when the sinkings surpassed the British and American shipbuilding capacity, pushing the British economy to the brink of collapse. The situation on the island reflected this constant pressure. Rationing of food and fuel became a part of daily life. The civilian population, already battered by the Blitz, now had to endure long lines to get basic products and adapt to a restricted diet. Even Churchill admitted that the threat of submarines was the only thing that truly kept him awake at night. The effort to counter this offensive was titanic, and even then, the Battle of the Atlantic demonstrated one of Britain's fundamental limitations. Its economy was extremely vulnerable and depended on a constant flow of external supplies. Without those lifelines secured, British resistance would not have lasted. That's why its defense had to rest on the two great pillars that made the difference: radar and the Royal Navy.
The Parliamentary Secretary to the Admiralty announced in the House of Commons that the new estimates make the British Navy the greatest navy the world has ever seen. Our fleet is so strong that it can accept a challenge by any probable combination of foes. That is no idle boast, and the Go On British News cameramen with the fleet secured these pictures to prove it. Combined home and Mediterranean fleets on maneuvers tell more forcibly than any words of the strength of Britain's defense.
This was Britain's final advantage if it hoped to defeat the Nazis alone. Starting with radar, an invention in which Britain was a pioneer and which proved decisive in the Battle of Britain. Thanks to this network of coastal stations, the RAF could detect German formations crossing the channel in advance, allowing fighters to take off at the right time and place. It wasn't just a technical innovation, but a force multiplier that compensated for numerical inferiority against the Luftwaffe and made each British aircraft even more valuable. And as if that weren't enough, the sea remained the natural domain of the British. The Royal Navy, the most powerful in the world at the start of the war, remained an insurmountable obstacle for Hitler with its great assets. Its ability to block Germany, protect convoys, and keep maritime routes open was vital for national survival. Although German U-boats posed a constant threat, the British developed increasingly sophisticated techniques to detect and neutralize them, from convoy escorts to the use of sonar. The combination of radar and naval supremacy turned the United Kingdom into a fortress surrounded by water. Germany could bomb, threaten, or plan invasions, but it never broke through that wall. Without these technological advancements and a navy that still controlled the seas, Britain would have been vulnerable to invasion or economic collapse. It was this mix of naval tradition and scientific innovation that ensured the island did not fall, sustaining resistance when all seemed lost and striking at every opportunity.
Then machine after machine takes off from this armored floating aerodrome over the wide ocean. Fighters and spotters and still more fighters, racing along the flying deck and flashing out into the blue. Another mighty muscular arm of the giant which we proudly call the Royal Navy.
Despite all this, no innovation, imperial army, or powerful fleet could change a fundamental reality. The United Kingdom could not defeat Nazi Germany alone. Germany had more soldiers, a vaster industry, and a continental territory from which it extracted human and material resources. The British effort was heroic, but insufficient. Resisting was not the same as winning. To defeat the Third Reich, it was necessary to open a front in Europe, and the magnitude of that mission far exceeded London's capabilities. The Normandy invasion in 1944 was possible thanks to the colossal involvement of the United States and Canada. Millions of men, thousands of tanks, transport ships, bombers, and a logistical apparatus that Britain could not gather on its own. At the same time, in the East, the Soviet Union sacrificed millions of lives and absorbed much of the German war machine. The United Kingdom was the symbol of resistance, the beacon that kept the war alive in its darkest moment. Churchill knew how to weave alliances, keep morale high, and turn Britain's cause into the cause of all free peoples. But without the industrial power of the United States and the Soviet resistance on the Eastern Front, Hitler would never have been defeated. In conclusion, the island was, without a doubt, an impregnable wall. With its disciplined army, the contribution of its colonies, its indomitable naval fleet, and the innovation of radar, it managed to resist when all of Europe was on its knees. But that same strength had a limit. It could resist, it could defend, but it lacked the capacity to launch the decisive offensive that would topple the Third Reich. Its economy depended on external aid, its resources were insufficient, and the magnitude of the conflict demanded more than resistance. Britain was the wall that stopped the Nazi advance, but not the sword that could pierce the enemy's heart. And it was precisely the union with other allies that transformed that wall into the blade that ended Hitler. Thus, we come to the end. If you like this video, we'll be waiting for you in our next installment of War Documents.